Colorado River is on the edge of another major crisis. Scientists say reservoir levels are falling back to dangerously low condition.
The Colorado River is supposed to be the lifeblood of the West, but in 2025 it turned into a graveyard. The heat was brutal, the water dropped, and the mud dried up. But when officials walked out onto the exposed riverbed, they didn't just find dirt. They found millions of tiny, sharp shells covering the rocks like armor.
Colorado Parks and Wildlife say invasive zebra mussels are being found in the water. Zebra mussels can cause harm to lakes, rivers, and whole ecosystems.
It looked like an alien invasion, and in a way it was. These things were not supposed to be there. And now that they are threatening to shut down the power grid and poison the water supply for 40 million people. The hidden army on the river bottom. As the heat wave of July punished the state of Colorado, the water levels in the northern part of the river dropped to historic lows. Banks that had been underwater for decades were suddenly exposed to the air. It was a landscape of drying mud and gray stones. It looked like the surface of the moon. State officials from Colorado Parks and Wildlife were out doing routine patrols. They were walking these new beaches, checking for trash, checking for fish that might be stranded. It was grim work. But then, near a place called the Government Highline Canal, just northeast of Grand Junction, an officer saw something strange. The rocks weren't gray. They were covered in a weird, bumpy texture. He moved closer. The texture was made of thousands of tiny, sharp edges. They were shells, striped, triangular shells, each one no bigger than a pistachio nut, all glued together in a thick carpet. The officer knew exactly what they were, and he knew exactly what it meant: zebra mussels. To the average person, finding a mussel on a river rock seems normal. It's nature, right? But to a water manager, this is like finding a termite in the foundation of your wooden house. It is a sign of rot. It is a sign of structural failure. The panic was almost immediate. Within hours, samples were taken. Within days, the confirmation came back from the lab. These were not just old, dead shells. These were recent. And worst of all, they found evidence of reproduction. You have to understand, Colorado has spent the last 20 years fighting a war to keep these things out. They have spent millions of dollars on inspection stations. If you own a boat in the West, you know the drill. You have to stop. They check your hull. They ask you if you have been in infested waters. They are paranoid about it. And for a long time it worked. The Colorado River was considered one of the last major strongholds that was mostly clean. But the drought betrayed them. Here is the thing about low water: it gets warm. The Colorado River, especially the upper part, is usually cold and fast. Zebra mussels don't like cold, fast water. They like it warm and slow. As the river dried up, it turned into a series of sluggish, warm pools. It became a perfect nursery for these invaders. The discovery at the Highline Canal was just the first domino. By November of 2025, the map of the river looked like a war zone. They found them near Rifle, Colorado. They found them in the canyon near Debec. These are places that are hundreds of miles upstream from the big reservoirs. This means the infestation is not just in one spot. It is moving, and it is moving against the current in some cases, which implies human help, but we will get to that later. The sheer number of them is what terrified the officials. We are not talking about a few clusters here and there. In some spots, the density was hundreds of mussels per square foot. Imagine walking on a riverbed barefoot. Usually it is slippery rocks and mud. Now imagine walking on a carpet of broken glass. That is what zebra mussels feel like. Their shells are razor sharp. They cut fishing lines, they cut the feet of swimmers and dogs. But the physical danger is nothing compared to the strategic danger. The Colorado River supplies water to 7 states and 2 countries. It is a plumbing system for 40 million people. If the source of that plumbing is contaminated with a creature that clogs pipes, the entire system is at risk. The governor of Colorado had to make tough calls instantly. Lakes were closed to boating. Reservoirs were locked down. It was essentially a quarantine for water. But water is hard to quarantine. It flows, it moves, and it carries the microscopic babies of these mussels downstream, straight toward the massive dams like Glen Canyon and Hoover Dam. This is the nightmare scenario. The officials were terrified because they know the history. They know that once a river is declared positive for zebra mussels, it almost never goes back to negative. It is a permanent scar. And the timing? It is tragic. The river is already on its knees because of climate change. The states are fighting over every drop of water. Arizona is suing California. Utah is fighting Nevada. The tension is incredibly high. Now add a biological plague to the mix. It creates a situation where we might have to release precious water just to try and flush them out, water that we cannot afford to waste. Or we might have to stop moving water entirely to stop the spread, which means drying out farms and cities. It is a lose-lose situation. When the news broke, it didn't get the same attention as a celebrity scandal or a political election. But in the offices of the Bureau of Reclamation and the local water districts, the mood was funeral. They were looking at spreadsheets and realizing that the cost of water was about to double or triple. The dried riverbed revealed the truth that no one wanted to admit. The defenses had failed. The enemy was inside the gates, and they were growing fast. But to really grasp why this is such a disaster, we have to look at the creature itself. What is it? Where did it come from? And why is it so good at destroying everything we build? The answer lies in the ballast tank of a Soviet ship from the 80s, the invisible enemy in the current. It sounds like the plot of a sci-fi horror movie. A creature from a distant land arrives in a spaceship, stays hidden, and then slowly takes over the planet by cloning itself millions of times. But this isn't fiction. This is the story of the zebra mussel. This creature is native to the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea region in Eastern Europe. For thousands of years, it stayed there. It was a normal part of the ecosystem. It had predators that ate it. The water temperature kept it in check. It was just a clam. But in the late 1980s, everything changed. Global trade was exploding. Massive cargo ships were traveling from Europe to North America. These ships are huge steel beasts. When they are empty of cargo, they bob around on the ocean like corks. To make them stable, they open valves and suck in millions of gallons of water into massive tanks called ballast tanks. This water acts like a weight. It pushes the ship down so it cuts through the waves. Sometime in the mid-80s, a ship in a freshwater port in Europe sucked in its ballast water. But it didn't just suck in water, it sucked in the microscopic larvae of the zebra mussel. These tiny babies, called veligers, floated in the dark, cold tank as the ship crossed the Atlantic Ocean. They survived the journey. When the ship arrived in the Great Lakes, specifically Lake St. Clair near Detroit, it dumped that water out to load up American cargo. And just like that, the invasion began. They were discovered in 1988. At first, scientists were curious, then they were concerned, then they were panicked. Within a few years, the zebra mussels had spread to all 5 Great Lakes and the Mississippi River. They move faster than any biological invasion in history. So why are they so dangerous? Why are they different from a normal clam you find in a creek? It comes down to 3 things: reproduction, adhesion, and filtration. First, let's talk about the numbers. A single female zebra mussel can live for 4 or 5 years. Every year, she can release up to 1 million eggs. Think about that math. 1 female, 1 million babies. Even if only 1% survive, that is 10,000 new mussels from one mother. In the warm waters of the Colorado River, they don't stop breeding. In Russia, the winter freezes them out. In Arizona or Utah, it is a tropical vacation. They breed 24/7. Second, the adhesion. Most clams live in the mud. They bury themselves. Zebra mussels are different. They have evolved a special organ that spins proteins into something called byssal threads. This is a biological superglue. It is stronger than almost anything humans can make. They can stick to rock, they can stick to metal, they can stick to plastic, wood, rubber, and glass. They can even stick to the shells of other mussels. This creates a terrifying effect. They stack on top of each other. You can have layers of mussels that are feet thick. They form a hard, concrete-like crust. And third, the filtration. This is the part that tricks people. Zebra mussels are filter feeders. They sit there, open their shells, and suck in water. They trap plankton, algae, and nutrients and then spit out clean water. An adult mussel can filter a liter of water a day. Now imagine billions of them lining the riverbed. They can filter the entire volume of a reservoir in a few days. The water turns crystal clear. People look at that and say, wow, look how beautiful and clean the water is. But biologically, that clear water is a desert. It is dead water. The plankton they are eating is the base of the food chain. It is the food for the baby fish. It is the food for the insects that the birds eat. When the mussels strip the water clean, they are stealing the lunch of every other animal in the river. But here is the catch. They don't eat everything. They are picky eaters. They have a way of sensing toxic algae, specifically blue-green algae or cyanobacteria. If they suck that in, they spit it back out. They refuse to eat it. So they eat all the good algae and leave the bad algae. Since the good algae is gone, the bad algae has no competition. It explodes. This leads to massive blooms of toxic green slime. This slime can release poisons that damage the liver and nervous system of animals and humans. So you end up with clear water that is full of toxic floating slime chunks. It is the worst of both worlds, and this is what is happening in the Colorado River right now. The dried rock showed us the adults, but the water is full of the invisible babies. These veligers, the babies, are the reason the spread is so hard to stop. You cannot see them. You can dip a bucket in the river, carry it to another lake, dump it out, and you have just infected a new ecosystem. They can float in a drop of water on a fishing wader. They can live in the residual water inside a jet ski engine. They are masters of travel. This is why the officials are so terrified. They know they cannot catch every boat. They cannot filter the entire river. The discovery on the dry rocks was not the beginning of the invasion. It was the moment we realized we had already lost the first battle. Now that army of shelled warriors is moving downstream. They are heading toward the massive infrastructure that keeps the American West alive. They are heading for the dams. And when they meet the turbines, things get expensive fast. When the turbines stop spinning. Let's step away from the biology for a second and talk about cold, hard cash. Because at the end of the day, the Colorado River is a business. It generates billions of dollars in economic activity every single year. It waters the lettuce you eat in the winter. It powers the lights on the Las Vegas Strip. It fills the swimming pools in Los Angeles. This entire economic engine relies on one thing: moving water through pipes. Zebra mussels are the enemy of moving water. The engineering of the West is built on a massive scale. We have the Hoover Dam, the Glen Canyon Dam, the Parker Dam. Inside these dams are gigantic intake towers. These towers suck water from the reservoir and send it crashing down through penstocks, huge steel pipes to spin the turbines that make electricity. To a zebra mussel, a penstock is paradise. The water is constantly flowing, which brings a never-ending buffet of food right to their mouths. The surface is hard steel or concrete, perfect for their superglue. So they settle there. One mussel settles, then 10, then 1,000,000. They start to form a crust on the inside of the pipe. This crust gets thicker and thicker. It creates friction. The water cannot flow as fast. The pressure drops. When the water pressure drops, the turbines spin less efficiently. They generate less power. In a region that is already facing blackouts during summer heat waves, losing even 5% of the power generation capacity is a disaster. It puts the grid on the edge of collapse. But it gets much worse than just losing power. These power plants are machines. Machines get hot. They need cooling. The dams use river water to cool the bearings and the generators. The pipes for the cooling systems are much smaller than the main water pipes. They might be only a few inches in diameter. Zebra mussels can clog a cooling pipe completely in a matter of weeks. If the cooling water stops, the generator overheats. Alarm bells go off. The system automatically shuts down to prevent an explosion or a meltdown. So, a creature the size of a fingernail can literally turn off the Hoover Dam. This isn't theoretical. It has happened at power plants in the East and in the Great Lakes. They have to shut down for days or weeks to clean out the shells. And cleaning them is a nightmare. You cannot just spray them with water. Their glue is too strong. You have to send people in with scrapers and high-pressure sandblasters to chip them off by hand. Or you have to pump massive amounts of chemicals into the pipes to dissolve them. This costs millions. And who pays for it? The ratepayers. That means you. The Bureau of Reclamation has estimated that managing zebra mussels in the western dams could cost over $1 billion a year. That is $1 billion that is not being spent on schools, roads, or new water projects. It is just being spent to scrape shells off walls. And then there is the agriculture. Imagine you are a peach farmer in Palisade, Colorado. You rely on water from the river to keep your trees alive. You have pumps that pull water from the canal. You have drip irrigation systems that deliver water drop by drop to the roots. If zebra mussel larvae get into your pond, they will grow inside your pumps. They will burn out the motors. They will clog the tiny emitters in your drip lines. Suddenly, half your orchard is not getting water. The trees start to die. You have to dig up your pipes. You have to buy new pumps. You have to install expensive filters. For a small family farm, this cost is enough to put them out of business. We are talking about a threat to the food security of the nation. Most of the winter vegetables in the U.S. come from the Imperial Valley in California, which gets its water from the Colorado River. If that water is infested, the cost of broccoli, spinach, and carrots goes up for everyone in the country. The terrified officials on the riverbed weren't just looking at an ecological problem. They were looking at an inflation problem. Also, there is a hidden cost: corrosion. The waste produced by zebra mussels is slightly acidic. When millions of them are attached to a steel gate or a concrete wall for years, that acid starts to eat away at the material. It weakens the infrastructure. We have dams that are already 50, 60, 70 years old. They are aging. They have cracks. Now we are covering them in a biological acid blanket. It significantly reduces the lifespan of these critical structures. And remember the drought? As the water levels drop, the concentration of calcium in the water goes up. Zebra mussels need calcium to build their shells. So the drought is actually making the water chemically perfect for them to build stronger, harder shells. It is a vicious cycle. The less water we have, the happier the mussels are. The happier the mussels are, the harder it is to move the water we have left. But these technologies are expensive to build and expensive to run. So the discovery of those dried, shell-covered rocks was a signal that the era of cheap water and cheap power in the West is officially over. We are entering a new phase where we have to fight a daily battle just to keep the taps running. But while the engineers are worrying about the pipes, the biologists are worrying about something much sadder. The river is becoming a silent graveyard for things that have lived there since the Ice Age. A river without life. When you are fighting an invasion, sometimes you have to do things that seem crazy. You have to burn the village to save it. In the case of the Colorado River, the burning involves poison. Scientists have discovered that zebra mussels have a weakness. They are incredibly sensitive to copper. If you introduce liquid copper into the water, even in small amounts, it disrupts the mussel's ability to breathe and settle. So, the state of Colorado is trying a desperate experiment. They are using a chemical called EarthTech QZ. It is a specially formulated copper product. But here is the catch. You cannot just dump copper into a major river without consequences. Copper is a heavy metal. In high doses, it is toxic to trout, salmon, and the endangered species that call the river home. It creates a moral dilemma. Do we poison the river to save the infrastructure? And what about the drinking water? Humans can tolerate small amounts of copper, but there are strict limits. We cannot turn the Colorado River into a chemical bath. It is too big and it is too important for human health. So the chemical solution is limited. We can use it in canals, maybe in small reservoirs, but we cannot treat the main stem of the river for 1,400 miles. This means the mussels are going to win the territory war, and as they take over, the native species are going to lose. The Colorado River has some of the most unique fish in the world. The Colorado pike minnow is a giant minnow that can grow to 6 feet long. The razorback sucker looks like something from the dinosaur age. These fish evolved in a muddy, turbulent river. They are already on the brink of extinction because of the dams. Now the mussels are delivering the final blow. As we discussed, the mussels eat the food web. They starve the baby fish, but they also physically crowd them out. Razorback suckers need clean gravel bars to lay their eggs. They spawn in the spring, but now when they go to the spawning grounds, the gravel is gone. It is covered in sharp, jagged mussel shells. If the fish try to lay eggs there, the shells cut them, or the eggs simply cannot attach and wash away. No eggs means no babies. No babies means the species disappears. We are looking at a total collapse of the native biodiversity, but the death toll doesn't stop at the water's surface. It goes up into the sky. This brings us to the botulism cycle. This is a horror show that is played out in the Great Lakes and is now coming to the West. Here is how it works. The mussels filter the water. They pick up bacteria, specifically Clostridium botulinum, which produces the botulism toxin. The mussels don't die from it. They just store it in their fat. Then a fish, like a round goby, another invader, eats the mussel. The fish gets a dose of toxin. It gets sick. It starts swimming weirdly, floating near the surface. Then a bird, a loon, a duck, or an eagle sees the sick fish and eats it. The bird gets a massive concentrated dose of the toxin. Botulism causes paralysis. The birds lose the ability to fly. Then they lose the ability to hold their heads up. They drown. In the Great Lakes, thousands of dead birds wash up on the beaches every year because of this cycle. We could see piles of dead ducks and eagles along the shores of Lake Powell and Lake Mead. It turns the river into a death trap. The officials standing on the dry riverbed knew this. They weren't just looking at rocks, they were envisioning a river that is silent. No fish jumping, no birds calling, just clear, empty water running over a bed of sharp shells. And the drought makes it all much worse. A healthy river has floods. It has massive pulses of water that scour the bottom, move rocks, and flush out sediment. These floods can actually crush and dislodge zebra mussels. But because we have dammed the river and because the climate is drying out, those floods don't happen anymore. The river is tame. It is stable. Zebra mussels love stability. We have created the perfect environment for them to thrive, while simultaneously making the environment impossible for the native species. It is a tragedy of management. We tried to control the river to suit our needs, and in doing so, we opened the door for a pest that threatens to take it all away. Now, as the crisis deepens, people are starting to ask questions. Hard questions. How did this happen so fast? Was it just an accident? And this is where the conversation shifts from science to the dark corners of speculation. Because when a disaster this big happens this quickly, people start looking for other explanations. Some theories suggest this wasn't an accident at all. 2026, the year of the collapse. Okay, we have covered the science, the money, and the ecology. But whenever something this catastrophic happens, there are always whispers. There are always theories that don't make it into the official government reports. And frankly, some of the circumstances around this invasion are weird. Let's look at the wilder side of this mystery. Theory number 1, eco-terrorism. There is a persistent rumor on the dark web and among fringe groups that the zebra mussel introduction in the upper Colorado wasn't an accident. We know that boat inspections are strict. It is actually very hard to get a contaminated boat past the checkpoints if everyone is doing their job. So how did mussels appear in multiple disconnected locations almost simultaneously? Some theorists believe that radical environmental groups, or perhaps foreign actors, planted the mussels intentionally. Why? To force the removal of the dams. Think about it. If the mussels make the dams too expensive to operate, or if they threaten to destroy the entire ecosystem unless natural flows are restored, the government might be forced to decommission the dams. It is the nuclear option for river restoration. It is a dark theory, but in a world of asymmetric warfare, biological sabotage is a real fear. Theory number 2. The ancient dormant release. This one is more woo-woo, but it has a lot of traction in online forums. The theory goes like this. The drought is exposing parts of the riverbed that haven't seen the sun in thousands of years. We are digging up ancient mud. Some speculate that we aren't just seeing modern zebra mussels, but that the drying river has reactivated ancient dormant biological cysts or pathogens from the soil. While scientists say these are definitely Dreissena polymorpha, the standard zebra mussel, the speed of their adaptation to the high-altitude, UV-intense environment of Colorado is shocking. They are growing faster and harder than they should. Is it possible that the stress of the drying river triggered a rapid evolutionary jump? Or that we woke up something else in the mud that is helping them spread? So what do you think is really going on? Is this just nature doing its thing? Or is there something darker behind the sudden collapse of the river's defenses? And seriously, would you support poisoning the river if it meant saving the dams? Or should we let nature take its course? Let me know your wild theories in the comments below. If you want to keep up with this unfolding disaster, make sure you hit that like button and subscribe.